Hi everyone, and welcome to the Emotional Intelligence Pawdcast. I'm your host, Sandra Thompson, founder of EI Evolution, and I am super excited to take you on this incredible journey. We're going to be exploring the transformative world of emotional intelligence and empathy, guided by some truly remarkable humans and their fantastic four-legged friends. In each episode, we'll dive into inspiring and heartwarming stories about our beloved canine companions. We'll discover the unique and magical bonds we share with our dogs and uncover the profound lessons they teach us about understanding and managing our emotions. From tales of loyalty and love to moments of learning and growth, our furry friends have so much to offer when it comes to enhancing our emotional intelligence. We'll also discuss practical tips and insights on how to cultivate empathy and emotional awareness in our daily lives, inspired by the natural wisdom of our dogs. So sit back and relax, maybe even with your playful pup by your side, and join us for an enriching experience that celebrates the incredible ways dogs help us connect more deeply with ourselves and others. Welcome to the Emotional Intelligence Pawdcast. This is an utterly incredible opportunity. I can't even tell you how excited I am. Not only is the person I'm about to speak to hugely enthusiastic and knowledgeable in this particular field, there's a couple of surprises that we're going to be revealing in a minute, which makes dogs even more superheroes than we thought before. So without saying anything more, I'm going to bring Claire in. Claire, how are you?
I'm really good, thank you. Really good. It's great to see you. Great to see you on screen.
It's great. It's great to see you too. And I can see you've got a couple of characters sat beside you. For those of you who are watching, we've got Bean and Bruce, who are waiting patiently for their treats.
For their treats, yes. Yeah.
Here they are.
You're going to sit, you're going to get up. There's Bruce.
Wow.
The big one is Bruce, and the little one, she is lying down. The little one is Bean.
So what breeds are they, Claire?
They are both yellow Labradors. So they're the same breed. Right. One is, they're just different lines of yellow Labrador. So he's a trials dog, sort of competition dog, and she is from more of the traditional gun dog stock. So they're exactly the same breed. She is tiny and just really red because her family she's not a red Labrador. They are a thing in their own right now, but she's just darker coloured, and he's like a big white polar bear, and he behaves like a big white soppy teddy bear. So yes.
We love big soppy teddy bears, that's for sure. So before we talk a bit more about Bean and Bruce, let's hear a bit about you and your story, because when I was doing some preparation for this call, all of a sudden, you know, like when all the bits and pieces come together in a jigsaw and then you see the full picture, I was suddenly like, oh, that's why Claire's doing what she's doing. So without any more suspense, tell the listeners and the viewers a little bit about your backstory and how you came to this point and what you do.
Yeah. So I am now, I'll start at the current, I'm now a veterinary physiotherapist, and I started my own practice last July. So that's now what I do, mainly horses and dogs. But I could do cats and all sorts. But when we last met, I was working for a very large charity, and we were working on customer experience and really trying to help improve the experience that all of our customers, whether they're service users or our donation, the people that working in fundraising were having. But my background prior to that was that I'd done a degree in agriculture that specialised in animal science, and I had, so that was way before. And I'd always wanted to do the physio side, animal physiotherapy. But back then there wasn't a course like there is now. You would have had to go back and do the people physio, human physio, I think you call it, human physio, and do another degree. And I couldn't do degrees back to back. You couldn't get funding for the second degree. And so I also needed to go and earn some money. So that all got shelved. And it's something that awareness has been there all the way through, that I wanted to do something working in that field, but just couldn't quite work out how to get to it. And then again, one of those moments where I came across the fact that the local university here had a part-time course, and that suddenly just blew my mind, because I could study, I could still pay my mortgage, look after my children, work through the night studying, but it absolutely worth it. So I've realized, a lifetime goal, and I'm working now, and it just feels like I'm in a magic bubble and I don't want it to burst. And I even apologized to my husband this morning, who was working from home, and I said, thank you for working so hard. I am working, but it doesn't feel like work. It's just I get to hang out with these guys and lovely horses and help them. It's a really nice part of the animal care. So our vets do incredible work, and we've got some wonderful surgeons around here. And then we've got lots of specialist facilities around here. They have a really, really hard job because they're meeting people and families in crisis, and it's the people and the animals. We get the nice end because we get the rehabilitation. So, of course, occasionally we unfortunately have to support our families if, as has happened recently to me, where that unfortunately their pet passed away. But the majority of our work is joyful. So it's the best bit of the sort of veterinary care, I think. So that's pretty. I'm just over the moon that it's all come together.
No, I mean it's thrilling to see you. When I can't remember how we were reconnected. I think you might have commented on one of the posts, and I said, I wonder what she's doing now. Oh my gosh, where has this veterinary physiotherapy come from? For goodness sake, I'm trying to pitch it all together. Thinking there's the stuff you did with the school, and there's Matt Millen. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, an MSc in animal science. Okay, got it. And so there's the qualifications and the expertise and the knowledge, and there's the passion and the satisfaction and the intrinsic kind of motivation to get involved in these furry creatures and the I don't know what are horses aren't furry, are they? They're kind of
our four-legged friends, I suppose, aren't they? Still,
I think I'll go with that. That could include cats, couldn't it? So doing that work then as a team, working with the vets, so these animals will have a certain type of treatment perhaps, and then you're like covering the secondary part of their recovery, or I suppose you might be giving the first line of recovery if they have an injury where they haven't had an intervention. Is that true? Is it always after an intervention, or is it
after? So we may get a more so in the horse environment, of somebody that's been out to a competition and come back, and if there's anything new that they have where it seems like they have an injury, we refer straight back to the vet. But the majority, I suppose, with the dogs, it's always coming from the vet. They refer to us. The legislation is really tight around veterinary physiotherapists. So you've got lots of practitioners who do similar sort of things, but aren't obviously trained in the same way that we are. But we are listed and named, and there's a really strong legislation, which is great. Everything has to be done under the guidance of the veterinary surgeon. So we are always part of a vet-led team, and that ensures that we're not, because you can imagine someone's dog or horse, or majority of them dog or horse, might be sore, lame, hopping, what have you, and then they get the physio in, and the physio would merrily try and do something, but you can't risk that. You can't risk overlooking something else that might have happened, and obviously the vets have the full history background, so that the industry is very much set up that the vets are there, they're the top of the tree, they're overarching, supervising, and we work with their supervision. So the thing that I'm really working on at the moment is working out how my vets in my area like to speak to me. So I've got one that's really happy on WhatsApp, one that they like to have a quick email, others like a full report, or what makes it easier for them, so that we can have that partnership looking after these animals, and then they're getting the best care. So
Fantastic. So let's come on in a minute to the types of things that you kind of do, because I'm really curious there. But in this middle bit, let's talk a bit more then about Bean and Bruce. So you've introduced what the breeds are. What about, what's their backstory? Where did they come from? Why are they in your house?
Why are they in my house?
Magical and brilliant.
So this one, the big one, he's a slightly easier story. I have two children. I love dogs, and so I wanted a dog in the house anyway. But I felt really strongly that I needed a dog in the house for the children to help them care for something other than themselves, to sort of have tolerance to set up good habits of care. I mean, they give us a great opportunity to get out into nature. So going out for walks and seeing the trees and looking at fractals. I'm a big one about fractals and cortisol levels. And I just wanted my children to have that empathy and the love, and that sort of lack of ego, which I've heard other people talk about on your podcast, it's just a really important bond for the children to have. So it was the purchase of Bruce was Bruce, that he was, that's how he kind of came on the scene, motivated by that. But someone at work put a picture up of some puppies. I sent the picture of him to my husband and said, I know obviously we can't do this, but how cute. And then obviously within a few weeks we had Bruce at home. So it worked.
Oh my gosh, a strategist through and through. Here's pictures of puppies. I know we can't do this, but yeah, I mean, come on, that works every single time.
Yeah.
I've got a quick question though, Claire, on the point about grounding and kindness and ego and empathy. How did you know that? Did you grow up with children? Is this something you've read and learned about from your studies? How do you know this? I think we know it, but how do you know it?
I think I'd seen a difference in households that had dogs and households that didn't have dogs, in terms of the behaviours of the people within the houses and the children within the houses. I had a dog growing up who was extremely tolerant, a little spaniel called Sarah. She was really tolerant, but if there were certain days when she didn't want to have Claire pretend she was a horse and put a cuddly toy on her back, she would just sit there and look at me and let out a very gentle, subtle groan, and I knew that she wasn't up for today, and that was fine. So I'd learnt a lot from her without realising it about signals and signs and their own choice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's really interesting, because what you've just said is so important, and I have forgotten that. The point about a child learning to respond to a set of non-verbal signals and being respectful of what those signals are. It's so true, because actually when I was growing up with Rusty the dog, he'd be exactly the same. He'd kind of give me the eagles sometimes. He'd say, come on, it's enough, right? It's been an hour, I just want to rest. And I do remember that, and I do remember thinking, oh, it's time to go and do something else now. And without, you've got obviously perhaps your siblings, but to see something you care about that loves you so kind of without judgment, unconditionally give you those signals. Perhaps I wonder if they penetrate through a bit more. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's really interesting, because it's there as a child, you're getting an experience of somebody else telling you that they want things to happen another way, in a really gentle way. So building your resilience around, you don't just pick up the dog and play with it when you want and drop it when you want. Like you get that resilience around needing to listen and understand, and that things don't always happen when you want them to happen, and really gentle lessons that I think the dogs particularly, I mean, cats are epic, aren't they? Because they'll just love you and you'll buy into it, and they literally just then wander off. Whereas dogs are a bit more rewarding.
I did think about bringing cats into this podcast, but I decided absolutely not, because I'm definitely a dog person, and cats have been an education on a few times when I've shared a house with them. So Bruce was basically here's a photograph husband, and I'm sure we can't have one, but then you ended up with one. What a surprise. And then what's the story with Bean?
So when we got Bruce, we lined him up really as being my son's dog, and encouraged that bond. And so he is Will's dog, although Will is away at university. And my daughter was always much more into animals and desperately wanted a puppy too. But we wanted to make sure she was old enough, so she had to wait a couple of years. And then that was, bizarrely and awfully, that was in lockdown, when the sort of timing was right to get her. But we were very lucky. There was a little farm up the road who'd had an accidental breed, and it was all people that we knew. So it was very lucky. And along came Bean. So Bean came along as Georgie's puppy. What a lucky girl. I mean, ridiculously lucky. But what then the magical thing about Bean, if I go on to that now, was that, so my daughter is autistic and was an undiagnosed autistic teen, and there's a lot in the press. You can find lots of research, lots of evidence about how difficult it is for young girls who aren't diagnosed, who don't get diagnosed early enough, and then the effect on their mental health. And so if you were to imagine the very worst of all those scenarios happening, that sort of thing is what was happening for George. So, but she loved Bean, and Bean was her little safe place, and that was lovely. And we were at the dog training centre, and she'd had a very stressful event happen. Georgie had, and had really gone into an autistic sort of meltdown. Yeah. And somebody said, go and get her. Somebody else said, "Oh, go and get her dog and pop her in the van." Someone said, "Go and sit in the van," and then someone else said, "Take Bean, put her in the van with George." I was helping with other clients because we were sort of both volunteering. And then Georgie came round within probably 15 to 20 minutes and was absolutely, completely, right, I'm ready to carry on. And normally, once she'd kind of come off a precipice, it would take days for her. She'd just be burnt out. But there was something about the timing and about the reassurance. And it was a suggestion then from one of the trainers who said, "Have you read about autism assistance dogs?" And we hadn't, obviously, so we did. And then they helped us to train her to meet all the standards. And the key thing about them is Bean's relation, they're all different because autistic people are all different. You meet one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. So they have different skills, different training. Georgie and Bean, deep pressure therapy is one of the kind of familiar things that you might hear about. And that is where if Georgie needs her, Bean will just sit on her lap and lean into her and just give her reassurance. So Georgie can choose to just stop the world and have a moment and just bring things down. Bean will nudge Georgie if she sees Georgie starting to become stressed. So she'll actually prompt her as well. So it opened her world. We could go into London because being on the train was hard, but she can go into London with the dog. She can go shopping. She can go anywhere with the dog. So she's now at university, which is amazing. Bean, I'll show you some of her stuff. Bean has her little harness that she wears. Right. University, it's got the wrong branding on, so I'll cover it. But the university have given her own little ID, and she walks around site with her ID, and she has her little coat.
Dog coat, right.
And then obviously she's a student, so she goes to bars which have noise. So she has military grade ear defenders.
Ear protectors.
Ear protectors. And then she's allowed in all the labs at university. So for the lab work, she has goggles, protective goggles, and paw covers to protect her. So all sort of military, all from military dogs and police dogs where they've created these materials, that the service dogs, assistance dogs at university all have them. So it's she's well looked after. And she's just changed our world. So she brought back a lot of joy when things were quite sort of, we couldn't work out what was going on and we didn't know. And and she's kind of opened the door for her. Yeah. So it's pretty emotional, but.
So I think I mentioned to you, Claire, that this is a blessing because honestly, Bean is the first assistance dog that I've met on this podcast.
Yeah.
And I feel really delighted and quite kind of privileged to hear this story because I have seen third hand the things that dogs can do. I'm curious if you feel comfortable to understand a little bit more about some of the training that you needed to put Bean through to make sure that Bean was ready for being of service to your daughter. What kind of things did Bean need to learn?
Her deep pressure work, she did it first. So you can train them. There are great organisations, which I can send you the links in case you wanted to put anything in show notes, what have you. But she did that herself. The prompting, how she did herself. Georgie had trained her really well as a puppy. So all of her heel work, her command work, the relationship between the two of them, Bean feels completely confident with Georgie. Georgie is her, in that whole pecking order that you have with dogs with training. She knows that Georgie's the superior. So she's immaculately well behaved out in public, and that's part of the assessment they have to go through to be able to go into the university. But it's sort of right to do with going anywhere, really, is that they'll lay on their mat and not move. And there's various other things about they don't get up and get distracted by things. So it's that sort of training that was the real. We wanted to make sure that was absolutely key, because she's there to benefit and improve Georgie's day, not for Georgie to be worrying about, oh, what if another assistance dog comes in and they want to sniff each other? But she just ignores everyone else and just, looks after Georgie. So, but that was sort of basic obedience, but done really, really, really well.
Sure.
But the deep pressure stuff was just, she did it. So then we just had to look at, okay, how can this work? The waiting lists to actually get an autism assistance dog or to get one trained are huge. They're so oversubscribed. The need is just absolutely astronomical. So we were very lucky that our trainers were able to really help with what we would need to make sure she could do. So she's been to Book of Mormon. She went to see, didn't you, Bean? That was very noisy.
That was very noisy, very naughty.
It was very, very naughty. Yes, she didn't have her. She should have had her ear defenders on the whole time. But she sort of squirrels around in a little ball at Georgie's feet under her chair, and it's lucky that she ended up being the tiny one and not the big polar bear one. But,
no, indeed. Yeah. That is fantastic, Claire. Honestly, so I also think that. And this is an impression I get, I might have got this completely wrong, so do correct me if I have got this wrong. It seems to me that society is more welcoming and more understanding and more accessible for dogs, because I've been in restaurants, I've been to places where I see assistance dogs accommodated and welcomed. I'm sure like even 5 years ago, they were not. They either existed, but they were only allowed in certain places, or they weren't allowed in unless you were a guide dog. So I mean, is that true? Have I made that up?
There's a slight difference in the type of dog. So therapy dogs are not assistance dogs. Assistance dogs are the same level of legal rights as a guide dog. So a guide dog, if you have a disability, you're protected under the Equality Act 2010. So that is why Bean is anyone providing a service should, and obviously we don't go around just marching in places, we're always very respectful of other people, but anyone that provides a service should accommodate her as though she's a guide dog. So she has the same rights as a guide dog. A therapy dog, so somebody who doesn't necessarily have a recognised disability but has a dog that supports them, because let's face it, having your dog with you builds confidence for anyone. You don't, not just people with disabilities, but there are lots of dogs around that are therapy dogs. They don't have the legal rights that Bean would have under the Disability Act.
Right.
So
okay.
that's really there is helpful. A difference. Yeah, there's different types of dog, and it does vary. That you could walk into a restaurant and say, do you mind if we come in? And they'll say, oh, sorry, you can't. And we have to very gently show them the legislation. But we are very, very, very tactful. And if somebody isn't comfortable and they feel like their boss might not understand, then we'll go somewhere else. We're not going to stand there and jump up and down. But, you do hear where some people with guide dogs aren't allowed in certain places. And
I'm sure
there are some people that still don't know. They're just people that haven't really got the memo, I suppose. But more places have, and maybe there's some trickiness because therapy dogs don't necessarily undergo the same training, and perhaps I don't know. But we've not been. We had one restaurant who initially said no, and we just said, we just want to clarify, she's not a therapy dog. She's an assistance dog, which means she's a service dog for somebody with a disability. And they instantly said, oh, yeah, that's fine. Let's get your water bowl. Where would you like to? But they were amazing. They were lovely. So it's just sometimes clarifying it.
I'm horrified that some people aren't letting guide dogs in, but that's probably for another day.
Twitter went wild over a lady who got asked to leave I'm not going to name the hotel chain in case I get the wrong one. No, but there was one of the big kind of, not even that value, but sort of value chains. They really came a cropper last year for asking her to leave in the middle. I think it was like 1 a.m. with a guide dog. It's awful.
What?
Twitter went went wild.
I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah.
So your daughter has Bean, your son has got Bruce, and how do you fit into all of this? Because ultimately, it sounds like you're left with them with you because they've gone to university. So you are still partly delegating responsibility.
We're here. Yeah. So Bruce is with us all the time. Bean is not working this afternoon because I think George must be. The only time she doesn't work with her is when she's actually doing something with the farm animals because of she'd need to go and be just shut in an office somewhere, and because she couldn't be right by her working with the pigs. That wouldn't be appropriate. And so so that practical, I think it must be something like that. So she'll stay at home just then, but she's pretty much with her the rest of the time. Wow. Luckily, Georgie's not much of a clubber, so she doesn't do too much sort of being danced around on the dance floor. But she's a bit of a quieter girl, but she's not normally here. She's normally with George. So but they're so, if you come home and you're just tired or worried, they just know, and they'll just come and be with you. They're just so we'd get all the benefits, and my husband will like you to know that he pretty much ends up feeding them because he's usually first downstairs. It's like, oh, you people, you want these dogs, who feeds them? He loves them, but he does like to know.
And that is the thing, isn't it? I mean, I've spoken to people who say, so we spoke to the children said they were going to look after it. They wrote a contract, in inverted commas, put it on the fridge. I will walk, I will feed. Absolute rubbish.
Rubbish, yeah.
I'm too busy. And the parents obviously end up doing all the work. Yeah. But I just think that's just the way of it. They you've got people who grumble about it, but then you see them like cooching up to the dog, and as if to say, no, not really, never wanted it, but I've just seen you talking to them and doing all sorts. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let's talk for a minute then around a bit more about the empathy and the emotional intelligence for both dogs. So, of course, Bean is trained and highly in tune with your daughter, which in itself is evidence. What other types of things do you see from the animal's point of view, both Bruce and Bean, in their relationship with all of you? What kind of things do they do?
Yeah, I think that they will just make their way to you and come and be with you. When you're talking about, you might be having a conversation about something that might be emotional or upsetting, and you suddenly find you've got a dog's head on your lap. They definitely pick up on changes in your heart rate. We know they can hear your heart rate across the room, so I'm sure that's a real giveaway for them. And when they hear us, dogs can hear your heart beating from the other side of the room. So if you come home and you're feeling a bit sort of busy, stressed, too much coffee, they'll be thinking, oh, Mum's a bit busy. Is it stress or too much coffee?
I never knew that. Well, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So so I don't know. And obviously they can smell stress and the different hormones and things like that. So they'll be very in tune, but so much is body language. They're very clever. So that comforting side is just unbelievable, isn't it? You've just got joy looking at you all the time, living in the moment, zero ego, as we've said, and just they're right there for you on tap. Sounds like it's a two-way relationship. It's not on tap one way. So that's what they really bring, is that just reassurance and solid, steady, love. And from our side, there's research papers that talk about. There's one particular study where they put people in a room and told them they were going to have to hold a tarantula. And then they got the people to stroke a tortoise, a rabbit, a cuddly toy of something and a cuddly toy of something else. The people that stroked the tortoise, so the hard shell and the rabbit, their cortisol levels in their sort of saliva tests and things, their stress levels dropped. The ones that stroked the cuddly toy didn't make any difference. So it shows that just having contact with that other spirit, that other animal, So we obviously get that because we're stroking them all the time, cuddling up.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
So let's move on now for a second into without naming any names or any particular types of breed. What have been your observations in the work that you're doing and the relationship between dogs and their families? What kind of things come up for you that you might want to share with the guys that are listening and watching?
The people that I have seen and that I work with, their animals are absolutely intrinsic. They're totally central part of their family. There's not a family that I deal with where the dog isn't a family member. And I guess that's not always the case, but it's the relationships and the care and the love, deep love that these owners have. It's just lovely. They know their little foibles and they can tell when they're a little bit tired or if they like things. Part of my work, if I'm working physically with the animal myself, we're trained in what to look for with, whether they squint their eye or lick their lips nervously or their ears drop back or the things that are kind of nervous. So people think, the ears drop back and they're smiling or don't they look cute? No, they're probably actually quite stressed. But the owners know all of these things themselves and are able to sort of say to me, oh yeah, that's true. Oh my gosh, look, he's loving that. Or, oh dear, so-and-so, is that a bit sore? They just know them really, really well. And what I see that they're gaining is the similar things to I said, that the routines, the habits that they have around walking their dogs and going out with family and treating them as one of their child's siblings and sort of the fun side of that and the jokes and spoiling the dog but not the child. Usually with grown-up children who come in and say, oh, that dog's more important than I am. So, probably is. So yeah, similar to us really.
Yeah, I always knew the pecking order in my family where one sister got married, one sister moved out, and then my parents would intermittently call me Rusty, and I was like, how does Sandra even sound anything like Rusty? It just doesn't. I think I know what's going on here. This is ridiculous. And I do think that the interpretation, understanding what the pet within the family, the routines, the signals and all that kind of stuff, that's just wonderful, isn't it? And I do recognize that when they're giving you insight to say, oh, they're loving that, or they're not too sure. When you do this, you might want to think about these things, because we're picking up, we're paying attention far more. And I think that's one of the things that I'm hoping people will get from this podcast is we pay attention to our animals. We do pay attention to other humans, but we really pay attention because they can't speak. It's like we tune in a bit more. I mean, what would you say to that?
Completely agree with you. We would absolutely notice if Bean or Bruce just looked a little bit down. We'd notice in a heartbeat. But one of us could be stomping around all day before anyone stopped to say, "You all right today? So you all okay?" Not interrogating each other, but with Bruce, if one of them or either of them just didn't seem quite themselves, looking that way, they are sound asleep now there.
That's because they're treated out. That's why, Claire.
The treats are all, I know, they're all here with the treats, but I think they sort of don't think I'm going to give them, so they're sort of given up and laid down.
They're back up now. I hate to tell you, you better produce the food, mate.
There you go.
Oh,
good girl, good boy.
Beautiful.
They're very, very foodie, but they're actually, obviously, as you can see, very patient. Not a lot of dogs you probably wouldn't want to do that to because they might argue over the food. You'd end up with a big scrum behind you. But these two are quite. They know their pecking order. I'm completely lost. Yes, so basically the dogs we would notice more instantly and we'd respond more quickly and having that capacity, again going back to why I had wanted to have them with the children, is that capacity to notice something other than yourself. We do it really easily with the dogs, but I think, is that because there's no ego? Because they're not going to say, I'm fine, thanks. They're going to go, oh, thank you for asking. You're not going to get a grumpy response.
Well, that's it. And so in this household, there's a 24-year-old, there's an 18-year-old, there's me and my partner. And occasionally we bring a dog in from the Dogs Trust. We have them overnight. And the energy in this house is just because we're all busy doing stuff in and out like shit. The dog's here. And all of a sudden there's footsteps coming down the stairs more often to fuss with the dog or to look at the dog or to feed the dog something. And there's just more smiles and intrigue. Honestly, it's a complete energy changer, completely.
Real energy, warmth,
Yeah.
and just, yeah.
So if you were to describe dogs' influence, contribution to society, how would you describe that, Claire? What kind of things might you say?
I think they provide reassurance for a lot of people and company. And I think that they provide a reason to get out and do something. And people meet people. The local park where you're walking, they provide that opportunity for communication. What the dog training place that I help at, they have a social, which is for the dogs. But these 2 different days, there's different grades: puppy, junior, which is your adolescents, and your seniors. They go around. The dogs are all monitored by trained people within a controlled environment, but all the owners are walking around together. So it's building communities as well. So it's really valuable. I think they bring an awful lot more than just we're there at home to cuddle them and maybe get some exercise. I did some research for my dissertation. PDSA say there's about 11 million dogs in the UK at the moment, which is a lot of dogs. But if they're not all going to be in perfect conditions, but that's probably a lot of happy homes. And if people are getting out and going for walks and having this sort of calming experience, and it's all good.
Yeah, no, that's phenomenal. And then a couple of top tips.
Sorry,
I'm over the door.
Front door.
A couple of top tips, if you can. I'm not sure if this is all right to ask, but as far as keeping your dog in good shape and minimizing kind of injuries, are there, from a physiotherapist perspective, are there any couple of top tips that people who've got dogs can think about that you'd like to offer up as advice?
Yeah, absolutely. So managing weight is a huge factor. So having your dog at the correct weight, your vet will be able to tell you. And then, as with other things, little and often. So if they only go for a 5-10 minute walk in the morning, don't take them out for a 3-hour run at the weekend. You've got to build up that sort of fitness. So if you can make sure you're walking them twice a day, fantastic. Doesn't matter if one of them's a short walk, even just to get them out, to keep that regular exercise. It's really good for their bones and their joint health. Lots of our dogs, particularly Labradors, have things that mean they're genetically predisposed to having osteoarthritis. So understand your breed and be able to look out for the signs. And if they do stop doing something or start doing something, so if they normally try and sneak on the sofa with you and they've stopped trying, maybe they're a bit sore. Maybe when they jump, it hurts. So maybe take them to the vet and inform them of a change in behaviour and nip it in the bud, get a physio on board before you end up with a dog with a serious sort of injury, which can develop over time if they're compensating. So weight, exercise, and notice those behavioural changes. Like the dogs that get a bit grumpy where they didn't used to. Maybe something hurts.
Yeah, so I've got a question, and there's a risk that it's going to be a stupid question, but like humans take things like cod liver oil and things.
Yeah.
Are there like cod liver oil equivalents for dogs?
Absolutely.
They've got things that the breed is going to get.
Yes, then you can look at. So there are there's some really, really good feed there out on the market that has supplements in it, but then there are specialist supplements. So Bean's just started on a specialist supplement that she has, and it's been sourced by a couple of doctors who are incredible. So we've started her on that because it's essential that she's comfortable and happy, and we're sort of preempting anything with her. So yes, there are supplements, but you really need to do your research. There's a chap in the horse world. I don't know if there's an equivalent in the dog world, but there are certainly experts out there who can debunk, because as with the human environment, you have people selling you a miracle, and actually it's not necessarily going to be able to do anything. So you do just have to be a little bit careful about who you go to for the advice, and get someone independent.
No, sounds good. Any final things, Claire, that you'd like to leave us with, and then we'll wrap up?
I think that adopt Don't Shop is a really good, in terms of your thinking about going and having that support for first-time dog owners, because the shelters will give you a lot of support and guidance and training. So they're a really good source of support. We did do the puppy route for various reasons of our own. So that's not, trying to vilify anyone that goes on that route. I would just say, do your research, make sure you know what you're letting yourself in for. And then you just have to do the training. You can't just do the routine. You do have to spend time every day asking your dog to sit right there and making sure it then does sit there. And if it moves, you put it back. And it's a bit tedious. Yeah. If you do that when they're sort of growing up, then you have these wonderful creatures that just, enhance everything. And everyone should have a dog, in my opinion.
So do I. And that's that last point that you've made around repetition and, keeping on it and keeping on the line. That's definitely the approach that I take when I'm training people in emotional intelligence and empathy. People think that they can do like one bulk half day or a day training and then the miracle is that everyone knows how to do it. When in actual fact, it is little bits, repetition over a period of time that gets you to a particular point. So that's really great learning too.
It moves it to the back part of your brain, doesn't it? If you just keep doing it, it's just in.
Moves it to the hippocampus, which means that it's going to then be intrinsic, which is all lovely. Really good.
Yeah.
Great to see you, Claire. Really, really good.
Thanks,
and
Sandra.
lovely to see Bean and Bruce. That's fantastic.
Sound asleep. You're going to say goodbye?
Forget it, mate. Unless there's anything in it, I'm not up
what else
for that.
Have you got?
Exactly. Really great to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks ever so much. It's been brilliant.
No, it's been lovely to see you. Thank you for having me.
So that's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in. If we've not connected already, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on there most days. You'll find me under CXEI Sandra. And also, if you want to find out a bit more about my work, then you can pop along to my website, www.eievolution.com. One final thing, and in the spirit of customer experience and feedback, I wonder if you might consider leaving a review on Spotify. I'll leave that one with you. So until the next time, be well and be pawsome. Ta-ra!